Thanks, Ian. Nice to see you. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. I'm really excited about the fact that there are so many people on a Saturday afternoon and that want to hear about Canadian public policy. So I will advance it to that. My name is Tim Barber. I'm one of 4 co-founders of Canada 2020. I'm going to tell you a bit about the organization, a bit of our mandate, and talk a bit about why I really think one of the things that we need to rethink and there's a bunch of re's. Reboot, re-energize is the Government of Canada and the policy-making function. And I know that some folks that I've seen around the room believe in that quite passionately, and hopefully I can convince the rest of you. I have to warn you, there's not necessarily an end here, but I'm going to give you some ideas. It doesn't end with the big bang, but hopefully I can inspire you a bit. We are Canada's leading progressive think tank, and we focus on what we call strategic federal government policy. And I speak in a few later slides about what some of our focus is. We host many events. We do original research. We pride ourselves on kind of starting conversations about our kind of research agenda and some of the things that we think should matter to the community. And our goal is to build a progressive community of people and ideas that will move to shape governments. And I say that that's a really important thing, and I'll come back to our inspiration a bit later. But I do think that there's not enough people willing to advocate for particular policies. I think the challenge function within the Government of Canada has been kind of thrown out the door, and I think we need to reinvent some of that. So I'll come back to that a bit later. We were founded in 2006. What better way to launch a think tank in Ottawa is to move it to Montreal. And we had 250 people show up at a conference. And the idea, I'll be honest with you, was a public policy conference in Ottawa, middle of the week. Too many people are able to dart out. So we did want to kind of trap them 2 hours out of town. And it mostly worked. It did. We anchored it with Al Gore, who at the time, people forget, but between about 2000, after his therapy, after some people would say he won that election. I'm one of them. But when we had him come and speak, he had just been on the cover of Vanity Fair. He had just finished Inconvenient Truth. He was a rock star, and I think it now gets the credit for reigniting and certainly the consciousness of climate change globally. And for that, won the Nobel Prize, won an Academy Award for his movie. We also had Jeff Sachs, a little guy by the name of Justin Trudeau. The event was co-chaired by John Manley and Anne McClellan, Lewis Lapham, who's the then editor of Harper's Magazine, Andrew Coyne, and others, all around the theme of progressive policy and practical solutions. And for all intents and purposes, it was a huge success, and we're really excited about it. So back we come to Ottawa. Since then, we've done, I think it's more like 80 events, but Alex, my colleague here, might disagree with me, but we should go back and count. But we're largely Ottawa-based. We do a lot in Toronto. We've done some in Montreal, and we had one big energy conference down in Washington. We host debates, panels. We have a regular speaker series, conferences, private dinners, but also other meals of the day. We live stream, and most exciting for me and for the people that support us is that 95% of our events are done on a free of charge basis. So the only barrier to entry is A, knowing about it, and B, actually getting you from wherever you are in town to the actual venue. We try to keep them downtown. Yesterday, I'm really proud to say that we just announced that on April 28th, we have Darren Acemoglu, who wrote the book Why Nations Fail, coming to Ottawa. And we put it live at noon, and when I left my house at 4 o'clock, it had oversubscribed at 400 people. So we are getting very large crowds out, which to me is a great sign that the policy community is alive and thriving. And this is as well, that we have 10,000 strong mailing lists, that we have subscribers and followers. We get roughly 300 to 500 people out at our events. We've got a massive online following, and also in terms of engaging in our work as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we regulate, it's hard to say we sold out because we don't charge, so we're oversubscribed quite frequently. Our research priorities, just quickly, there's 5. Increasing innovation and productivity. As most people will know, Canada is really going backwards in terms of productivity through the OECD, huge problem, and I'm not entirely sure what the solution is, but we're working on some potential solutions. This is interesting, reducing income inequality and polarization. When we started doing work in this area 3 to 4 years ago, everyone thought, like, what's the problem? I would argue that this is now the big challenge for Western governments to deal with. even the Pope is concerned. You know, that certainly in the States, who are often the gold medalists and these sorts of things, you know, we're not quite as bad, but we're getting worse and we're working on this. Squaring the carbon circle. We are a massive user of carbon. We're also a massive producer of carbon burning products. So we're trying to find some way of squaring that. Sorry, there we go. Rising to meet the Asia challenge. As most of you will know, 80 to 85% of our trade is with one customer. And we think that we need to start diversifying beyond that into these large markets that are emerging. And it's quite exciting, I think, for the Canadian business community. And last, but certainly not least, is securing our healthcare system. We believe that nothing defines us more as Canadians as our healthcare system. We believe as an organization that a single-payer public system needs to be maintained and needs to be sustained. And the reality is, though, that we're getting older. Everyone knows that more people are going to be drawing off a system and fewer people paying into it, and we need to think through ways of dealing with that. When I arrived in Ottawa, I probably heard more than anything else, wow, is it ever a great place to raise a family? And I was thinking, that's really good because I'm single and don't have children. So as a grad student, I was really excited. I was also told there is this incredible after hours kind of, you know, the politicos are out in the bars and are talking policy. Well, I couldn't find it anywhere. Well, I certainly couldn't find it at the scale that I thought, you know, after seeing all these, you know, political shows and, you know, that there'd be particular places where people go. But, you know, being in crowds like this and what we do at 2020, it does reinforce the belief that there is a demand for it. So, I used to go drinking with a couple of friends of mine at a place called the Mayflower 2, which has since closed. I don't think we had anything to do with that, but it was on Queen Street. And it was interesting how you could kind of collect people into these interesting talks and bring them along. And a number of us, 4 in particular, decided, what if we try to institutionalize this? What if we started a regular speaker series? And, you know, we brought in a speaker on a particular topic once a month or thereabouts. And we started something called the Cathay Club. And I swear to God, before we landed at the Cathay restaurant, we named it the Cathay Club. But anyway, if anybody remembers this restaurant, it's just across, it's on Albert. Really average Chinese food was its stock and trade. But for $9.95, you could have as much as you could eat of that average Chinese food. There was no MSG, I guarantee you. But it was up on the second floor. It was a large room. And we, for about 7 years, held events up there, ranging in speakers from Bob Ray, who had just lost his election, to Gordon Robertson, the former clerk of the Privy Council, Stéphane Dion, before he became a politician. He was an academic at Université de Montreal. You know, a wide range, I think over 60 to 70 dinners that we had at this thing. And what was fascinating is that it was 40 or 50 people up to 120. But there was a real sense of need for this sort of discussion and debate. And it, you know, people would meet their husbands and wives there. 2 of my co-founders actually ended up getting married. So it was a really great part of the kind of community fabric that I think is often lacking in Ottawa and in national capital. We'd often leave here and then go back to the Mayflower 2, and that made for a lot of late nights and big hangovers. But anyway, sorry, I have to change that. Sorry, there we go. Okay, so it's new branding. So I've spent quite a bit of time in Washington. I've spent a bit of time in London, a bit of time in Paris, and I've met people from German think tanks, or the Stiftungs, as they call them in Germany, where it's institutionalized into the system. The political parties have these think tanks within their buildings. So it's an important part of what they do. We're affiliated with an organization called Center for American Progress, which was founded in 2003 by John Podesta. He was President Clinton's last chief of staff. He decided to start, kind of turn the tables on the conservative movement in the States, which after Barry Goldwater, as the stories go, and there's many books on this, in 1964 when Goldwater lost, the conservative community said, we've got to get our act together. And as a result, the Heritage Fund, Cato, these incredibly well-financed organizations started. And there's incredible conservative infrastructure around the Republican Party. And John, to his credit, has built this amazing organization. If any of you ever have an opportunity to go visit, it runs on about a $40 million a year budget. It has about 240 people working there, and it is an absolute machine. It's got broadcasting capacity. But we're part of something called Global Progress, which John also started. And it's a loose affiliation of like-minded organizations throughout the OECD, and they meet twice a year. I was at a conference in Washington last year, their 10th anniversary, and we were asked, we did a presentation on our organization and on Canada in general. And the question was put to us, why is there such a lack of a think tank culture? And why is there such a lack of what they call progressive infrastructure? And other organizations like Broadbent and others are working on that, as are we. But I think the answer that we came up with, for a very long time, certainly in post-war Canada, that government was the think tank. The government of Canada was that progressive source of inspiration and ideas. And when you think about, where did the Canadian pension plan come from? Where did the thinking around the free trade agreement come from? Where did, when the government decided to launch a national gas company, when they bought Petrofina and created Petro-Canada, that came out of the government of Canada. It wasn't from some outside think tank. The analytical work was done within the public service. And I would argue that that muscle, as I describe it later, has been really atrophied quite badly, and that we need to rethink and rebuild that, and reboot and reinvigorate, and I've got some other reinvent, re-energize, and re-inspire. And the core of that project, I would argue, is getting people to see that the Government of Canada is a great place to work. You know those 10 by 10 Treasury Board veal fattening pens? Yeah. And 8 layers between you and a decision? But there is inspiration. I worked at Phase 4 at one point for about 6 months, and it was tore my soul out. But anyway, but it is exciting and it is fun, and it's not just through public service, but it's organizations like Canada 2020. What we're doing, what the Broadbent Institute is doing this weekend, what the Manning Institute did 2 weeks ago. It doesn't have to be. To me, it's about creating that clash of ideas, that excitement of getting people excited about public policy, because good public policy matters. That's my ultimate goal. And I think at the core of what we do at Canada 2020 is a belief that that government matters, that government can play a positive role in people's lives and can shape markets and help in a variety of ways. I'm going to close out just over the next few minutes with one of my favorite commentators is a Canadian. People don't realize that David Brooks from the New York Times was born in Toronto and moved to the US when he was about 9. But he was asked, he's on a regular PBS program that I really enjoy watching, and he was asked at the 5th anniversary of the 2008 meltdown of the financial markets, what do you think is the big lesson learned, or what's the leave behind? And he said, at a time when you have massive income inequality, you need a crumbling infrastructure, that there are increasingly complex problems that take complex solutions from governments, that government is increasingly detaching from people's everyday lives. And the other, I think, more important thing is that people's trust, and this is especially acute in the States, I think, less so in Canada, but I think it's increasingly a problem, that trust in government is evaporating very quickly, that people no longer look to government as part of the solution. And that's a huge problem. And I think that if we're going to rebuild and rethink and re-inspire something, that is something that's really, really important. As I said earlier, I think government is the mechanism through which we can act collectively. With all due respect to church groups and NGOs and whatnot, this is our way of dealing with big societal issues, and there's no replacing that. So I think it's really, really necessary, especially for the people in the bottom quartile in terms of the income bracket, bringing people along. This is the way that we can do it best. So back to my theme of it being a muscle, and we need to exercise it. And I don't think there's enough exercising going on. I see lots of evidence, groups like this, what we do, the turnouts that we get. People are really keen, but it is also, I think, the marketplace for ideas, as much as I do think it's opening, I do think that there is a supply-demand function between you've got to be asking for policy ideas for people to kind of create them. And I do think that there's some opportunity opening up around that. So the ask is to not lose faith. For you that do work buried in the public service, keep the faith. I do think that you will be, that the demands will come back and that we can make a big difference together. And as I said, I don't have a big ending or a big ta-da, but the ask is that we continue to think about how to re-inspire, rethink, rebuild the Government of Canada, and especially that policy function. So thank you very much for your time, and please join us for our events, which we do about one a month, sometimes more frequently than that, and visit our website and follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much.